do all them things we see on TV and get the feel of the synthesizer really. Come let me join the people and rock with body, so we could get the feeling to get the sound vibrating you, and how the music making you.
What an intro, what an intro, what an intro. One of the greatest, sweetest, most expansive sounds in soca in the last 50 years. Wow. Okay, an entry point into a great conversation today inside the Wajang Discotheque. I belong to the House of Music. Is so pleased to finally welcome this man we trying to track down for so long, Etienne Charles. Trumpeter, musician, storyteller, badass from long time. Welcome inside the Wajang Discotheque.
Good morning, good morning.
Good morning.
It's great to be here, and it's good to be home and to hear soca in Trinidad. And it's good. Yeah, track one. Well, I had to choose Disco Daddy because soca is one of our indigenous forms of music, but also because Nello was one of the first to go in the studio with vibes.
Yeah.
And just sing lines to musicians and have the arranger there. And it was you could always tell that it was a very organic experience.
Yeah.
Being with Nello in the studio. So and also I wanted to big up Tobago as well.
Absolutely.
So
Number one.
That's why we came on. And just understanding Nello's story, moving to New York, and he was a musician, saxophone player, I think he was playing. But that's how we start, so.
And also a Shango man as well.
Very much
very,
so.
Very important intervention in his trajectory and in his life. And I mean, Shango, one of the songs that he sang is very much a pop song, but also like a real tribute to a spiritual journey that many Calypsonians and artists went through in the 70s. So, yeah, it's an interesting... I really love Nelson as a contributor to the shaping of how we see soca music, especially. Yeah. And
his music is also, what I see with Nelson, is his music is a microscope into our culture in a very, very holistic way, A teenage girl about 80-something.
Yeah.
On she roller skates and she disco dances, disco splitting. Before she fall and break up, she it's almost like a very cinematic way.
Yes.
Of presenting the music.
Yeah.
And with all the space that Clive Bradley left for him, you're hearing the lyrics twice the first time.
Yeah. Yeah.
With all the tunes, Always One Family is another one that's like that. My Lover is another one like that. Every lyric you hear it crystal clear because of the space.
And you see it as well, it's like as I say, you're watching it in a cinema, you're watching it in Globe and Pit. You're seeing everything about it. 2 hot dogs in your stomach.
$4, $2 each.
So Etienne, let's dig back down into your entry into music, like at what age you realize, wait, now this music thing, it's in my skin and I need to follow it.
Mine is, I don't think there was ever a realization. It's just that it's all I know, My mother, both of her grandfathers were musicians. My father played pan and was a DJ. My grandfather played cuatro and guitar and sang. It's Trinidad, a lot of the music comes in the form of families. Mm-hmm. So I was lucky enough to be in a family where music was everywhere. My mother always had the record player playing in the house. And so that's really how I got started. And then it's from the house to Bishop's Junior in the choir one time. Mm-hmm. And then from the choir, next thing we had a recorder. Abby, my sister, brought home a recorder and I started playing it one time. So then was the recorder. And then after that, my uncle Peter heard me play recorder and said he's going to get me a saxophone. And I was super excited because I always wanted to play saxophone. Watching Sesame Street, Hoot, the owl played saxophone. So I wanted to play saxophone like Hoot. And then he sent me a trumpet. And that was that. And I started learning trumpet. I was equally as fascinated. Just to see a shiny thing in a box that was mine.
Yeah.
At that time, there was no cell phones,
Yeah.
no iPad. There was no cable TV. You know, it was either you go outside and play, you come inside and practice. And so for me, I did both.
Yeah.
And that's how I got into, trumpet. But I was already into music. And then, as I got older, started playing in different bands. And, kind of did like the kitchen sink in Trinidad. So them old-time dance bands, kind of in the style of Joey Lewis.
Yeah.
Orange Sky.
Yeah.
Everything in between.
Yeah.
Jingles, doing horns for stuff. I got into arranging without even knowing it. And all the time I was playing in Phase 2 on the road, Carnival Monday and Tuesday. And then for Panorama from Form 6 on. So yeah, it was, it was a very holistic. And I always say the kitchen sink was fed to me with respect to music. And that's, later on getting very heavy into, meeting Orisha people and digging into the Orisha forms and the different grooves. One of my favorite people was Junior Noel because he had a very serious recording of all of the different grooves in the Orisha. Junior and Redman were the first drummers I ever heard when I was 3 years old. Yeah. So to have that influence as well in my music has always been there. So yeah, I just think of it as a big circle.
Yeah, wonderful. And leaving Trinidad to pursue music, what was it like leaving Trinidad to decide, okay, this is the thing that I'm doing, and this is the thing that I'm going to do for the rest of my life? Because, what you describe in your family is also the kind of transience of the musician. So you do it like on the side, right? You play an instrument on the side, you're in the choir, but you're really working insurance, or, so
tattoo.
Yeah, exactly. People are people, you know what I mean?
You know what I mean.
Euclid, are you? Where are you?
Mr. Francis, what was the ad? Is like, and then I'm called Tattle, and they put me on to Mr. Francis, and and Tattle, well, people are people.
That's what ads was ads. Anyway, but not to give anybody any free advertising, but anyway, yes, the whole idea that, you can make a living as a musician. What was the switch that went off in your brain, and when did that switch go off?
Well, that switch, believe it or not, it was in a spiritual Baptist church in San Fernando in 1995. I had to play a solo, play Count Your Blessings, a hymn. And after this, it was one of them long Sunday morning services, so we reached 7 o'clock. I didn't play till like 11:59, then they broke for lunch. So breaking for lunch, and the mother in the church, she was the priestess. And she shook my hand, and she had $10 in it. She made sure that the $10 ended up in my hand. And I was like, "You mean to tell me I could make money playing music?" And from then, I think I started picking up momentum, just understanding that it was something that I could do. I didn't really get into the idea of music as a profession until I was about 15 or 16 when I went to Berklee College of Music for a summer program. And that's when I got Tizik, because there's all these young people around me. I had never been surrounded by all young people, like 5,000 people, all of them interested in music. And it was a new community to be a part of, and it was a global community. So it was already a chance for me to represent Trinidad and to be able to show, even though I'm not an athlete or I'm not a this, I could still do my part to, put a showcase on where we're from and what we have here. And that was it, and then I decided that I wanted to study music in university. I wasn't really good at anything else, my grades, people, you can't spell any word. You can't pronounce any word with the grades I used to get. Because there's no vowels.
On that note, next track, please. Short drop. Love Yuh String Band playing Trinidad Paseo.
Yeah, it's an old Paseo. And the interesting thing about this recording is it literally changed the history of music.
Yeah.
Because up until, everybody always talked about the original Dixieland Jazz Band recorded in 1917. But they went to this band, Love Yuh String Band. Well, at the time it was known as the Trinidad Dance Orchestra. They went to New York and recorded in 1912. That's 5 years before. Yeah. On phonograph for, major record labels in New York. So it shows that our music had weight and impact.
Internationally way before.
Long before.
So let me dive into a current conversation that's going on about putting Trinidad on the map. We're constantly in the state of trying to put Trinidad on the map when, in fact, we've been on the map all the time. And certainly for somebody like you, who's had #1 jazz album in the world, you're a Guggenheim Fellow, you're shaking things up internationally. How do you feel when you hear Trinbagonians still say this whole thing about putting Trinidad and Tobago on the map?
Well, it really comes down to education, and I'll never forget there was a politician who will remain nameless who made a statement in protest to the government at the time buying pianos. And he said, because at the time the government bought us like maybe 4 or 5 Bosendorf of grand pianos. And, he said, I don't know why we don't have any history of pianos in Trinidad and you can't play a good chutney on the piano. What's the point? And I was like, Winifred Atwell's from Trinidad, first black artist to sell 1 million copies of an instrumental in the UK. Hazel Scott's from Trinidad. Lionel Belasco. So I think it comes down to education. And we really have to teach ourselves about what good things come and how we are actually shaking up the world. Because we are, and in all fields. Yep. It's not just music, it's not just sports, it's art, it's science. Yep. You know what I'm saying? I mean, there are people like Camille Wardrop Allen who've been at NASA 20-some years, at the forefront of aerospace engineering. I mean, there's a long list. And I think, but yeah, from respect to putting Trinidad music on the map, besides educating our people so that we constantly have pride in what's actually going on at the time and knowing what's going on, I think also there needs to be a steady push monetarily from the powers that be, simply because when you look at Jamaica as an example, right, people are, well, how come reggae this and that? I was like, well, the government been putting money into it since the 60s, specifically because Edward Seaga had a record label. They understood the importance of it, and so they paid to send Byron Lee to play the World's Fair. And then after that, they constantly put money into getting the bands out, so that by the time was Island Records?
Yes.
Was in
Chris Blackwell.
Chris Blackwell. By the time he was in London, the apparatus was already in place for somebody like Bob Marley to come into the scene and blow up worldwide. Yeah. So it's a series of things that need to happen. But yeah, I think it's a combination of educating the people to know what's out there, who's out there, what we're doing, but also specific strategic placements of people performing so that people know outside of the world that this is what's going on in Toronto.
So go back to Love Yuh's. You were saying that when you first heard this track, what went through your head?
Well, it's just, I had heard about these string bands, reading about them in like John Cowley's book, and knowing that was the sound that people chipped to on the streets. Yeah. At a certain time, it was the string bands on the road. And yeah, it just put me in a time machine. And knowing the story of them playing concerts in Trinidad to raise money so that their wives could have money to buy food while they were on tour in the U.S. Yeah. They did 2 concerts in Trinidad in May of 1912 before they left, specifically to raise the funds to feed their families while they go on to play music. And then they went to New York. And the one thing I'm trying to figure out is where they played in New York, because I'm guessing they did a concert there before they did the record dates, because they did a U.S. tour. Right. And so yeah, it put me in a time machine, and I love that. And it's like the first time I heard Lionel Belasco's music. Yeah. It's that same type of thing. You get, or first time you hear one of them stories about people like Alf Cordalo.
Yeah.
Like that time in Trinidad was so radical and so bohemian and so formational into what we have today.
Yeah. And I mean, if you think about the Trinidad of that time, there would have been people like Horace Ove was still living here. Well, I mean, he was born in 1938 or something like that. So yeah, I mean, there would have been, people. CLR James would have been here.
You had you had Garveyism going on. You had big Pan-Africanism going on. You had big Pan-African conferences going on. A lot of Trinidadians.
Henry Sylvester Williams was involved.
People like
George Padmore would have been young at the time.
Yep, John Alcindor was in London already.
Yeah, J.J. Thomas.
Yeah. So that time was I see it as a very radical time.
Yeah.
And the music shows it as well. Yeah. Because that band played all kinds of different styles. Yeah. It's not just passe, they played waltz, mazurkas, all these different things. Yeah. Ragtime and it.
Short drop. Next tune, please.
A catching hell, plenty hell. I sign a contract digging Miss Lena well. A catching hell, plenty hell. I sign a contract digging Miss Lena well. Lena declares she feeling thirsty. Kitchener, please find some water for me. I say the way I digging, you must get some. If your well have water, it's bound to come. Tuk back, tuk back, tuk. That's the way how I digging. That's the noise the well making. She say, Kitchi, man, what's wrong? I find the job is taking too long. I say, well, all I can tell, you have too much bush knocking wrong the well. You see, every time I dash in the spade, some of the grass tying up the blade. I had to take time to divide the grass to make ample room for the blade to pass. That back, that's the way how I dig in. That's the noise the well making. I notice something feel tight, and the enemy spade ain't walking to right. I say, look, darling Leno, you had a man digging here before. Since I 7, I digging well, and any fast move I could always tell. I say, I feel something in the way.
Owen Roberts, Lord Kitchener, what a tune! And I mean, it's a very within the tradition of the immense slackness. Double entendre of our calypso tradition, digging Miss Leno well. I mean, but beyond that is the beauty of the music.
And that is one of the most brilliant things about Rupert Nurse and the collaboration of Rupert Nurse and Kitchener specifically. And I would say Rupert Nurse, Kitchener, and Fitzroy Coleman.
Yeah.
Is that they were able to create this new sound that was influenced by the big band arranging sound, but with smaller horn sections. So Rupert Nurse was a great arranger who actually his family lived right here in Belmont on Circular Road, but he was based in London. But when he was living in Trinidad, he did a mail order course with one of the main arrangers, I think, for Glenn Miller's band, and learned that style of four-way close writing, which is a way that you voice 4 horns. Mm-hmm. And he put that in all of his sound. You hear it in My Person, you hear it in Leno's Well, you heard in Easter in Trinidad, all of the classics that he did for Kitch. And then Fitzroy's blowing in between. And for me, it's just one of these utopic sounds of calypso. And I'm pretty sure this was on Melodisc. And but then the lyrics are classic because he's actually singing about digging a well. Actually.
He is actually singing about digging a well.
It's like Mango Bear.
Yeah.
That Sparrow sing.
Yeah.
He said that it's like if you eat it right, the hair wouldn't stick in your teeth. And you're bound to say that it tasted sweet, sweet, sweet. But if you eat it wrong, don't walk in the street. Everybody gonna know when they see the hair in your teeth. It's about a mango. So that's why I brought in Leno as well. Because, and Trinidad and Tobago's music at that time was so influential in Europe, specifically in London and Scotland and the UK. And as a result of that, you had this resurgence of calypso in the 50s in New York.
Yeah.
All of it is all related. It's like the diaspora communicating, and then that influencing what's going on in West Africa. Because they starting to hear calypsos, they starting to get independent. It was all related, and the music was a big part of it.
Yeah, yeah. That whole idea of the African diaspora in the early part of the 20th century, and we had started talking a little bit before about like the fact that Garveyism was big all over the region, and certainly anywhere that African people were gathered. Yeah, and how did then the music started creeping into the space of projecting certain ideas. I mean, Kitchener singing a song about Ghana's independence. To this day, I mean, and I know that you visited the continent and visited Ghana, and how is your work received on the continent?
Oh, I love playing on the continent. I've done concerts in Benin, or Benin, in Togo, in Accra, in Ghana. I've also been to Kumasi to meet the great Kunimo. I've also played my music in Morocco, specifically in Tangier, Rabat, and Casablanca. And it's fun to see them get the immediate connection that, because the diaspora is the diaspora and the roots are there clearly. But what I always try to do when I perform is to make sure people understand the depth and density of the connection, specifically between the English-speaking Caribbean and West Africa, from different points in history, from the time of the Ashanti Wars, when the British West India Regiment was fighting that war for the British, and the brass bands from the Caribbean were marching for them bands from back then. And then you come forward to people like George Padmore and Ulrich Cross, who were instrumental in securing the independence of the first independent nation on the African continent.
Wild.
It's madness. So that for me, I always tie to the music. Because at the time that they were doing that in London, Kitchener was on the scene.
Yeah.
That was the early 50s.
Yeah.
Late 40s, early 50s. Kitchener was the man.
Yeah.
And he was playing 2 clubs a night. So they must, and at that time, it's still like that in the diaspora. When you go to New York or you go to Brooklyn or go London or wherever, there's a place where the West Indians line. And it happened, and Russ Henderson used to have his jam and all that, Sterling Better and cool, just knowing these names and calling them.
Yeah.
And meeting them when I was a little boy and not even knowing
the
what
greatness.
they had done. Yeah,
Yeah. So let's drink a little spirit for the spirits
this is for,
of
for
those
Russ
who,
and for Kitchen.
for those who cleared a path for you to have this.
Ashe.
Short drop, next tune. Atwell and Panam North Stars, a band that morphed into Starlift.
Basically.
Yeah. Whoa, yeah. Winifred Atwell, Another name that you never hear when we talk about music, and people, yes, there are some people who know the name and mention it like in a very superficial way. But in terms of the impact that she made on the music scene internationally, and I also like the fact that you're choosing these musicians who cleared a path in a world that it didn't have the technology, didn't have the access to resources and the mobility that we think that we have now, you know. But Winifred Atwell was like really dealing with the scene.
Now, Winifred Atwell, I mean, I play Winifred Atwell's music every night in my band because people need to know her name. And she came up at a time when people weren't ready for that. Specifically, the American market was actually not ready to see a black woman dealing with the piano like that. They actually weren't ready. At that time, yeah, that was a tricky time, the 50s. But she was top of the line in the UK and Europe. She had her hands insured. She was one of the highest paid musicians and solo artists in Europe. She was one of the highest selling instrumentalists in the history of Europe. She actually was Elton John's biggest influence to play the piano.
Wow.
So there's all these Trinidadian links to all these European superstars. I mean, you have Winifred to Elton John. You have Woodbine to the Beatles.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And just to be same thing, just to be able to say their names and play their music. And that record blows my mind, Winifred and Pan Am North Stars, because it's all kind of genius in there. It's Winifred being able to voice and orchestrate on the piano in a way that it speaks above a whole steel band.
Yeah.
And it's Anthony Williams' genius of being able to leave the space in the middle of the steel band, of the steel orchestra, leaving the space so that the overtones of the piano come out crystal clear.
Yeah.
For him to be able to manage that and navigate that, for me, that is all kind of genius going on in this recording.
Tony Williams was, oh my God. Another name that, you know, I mean, he died
Last year,
during the COVID pandemic. You know, in relative ignominy in a place like Trinidad, with his genius, you know, also not really recognized. But Tony Williams also was one of the pioneers, the founding visionaries of steel band.
I mean, Tony Williams, you wouldn't have most of the major arrangers today if you didn't have Anthony Williams. You know, Bugsy Sharp comes heavy out of Anthony Williams, Ray Harmon. I could go down a long list and you hear, he was the original quote unquote GOAT.
Yeah.
You know, he won 2 panoramas back to back at the beginning of the whole thing. And Pan Am North Stars, I'm going to start doing more digging into that because they were a very flexible band. Back then, steel bands were a lot more flexible than they are now in terms of the fact that it wasn't just about Calypso and Panorama. The focus was not even about Panorama, was one thing for them. These bands were playing throughout the year, and Pan Am North Stars was touring because they had an airline sponsor. Yeah. You know, and so there was a lot, you know, I love watching videos of Taspo. Yeah. Especially that video with Glenn Close when she's like 16 years old in the vocal group. And the fact that they learned that on the spot right before recording it on the TV station. You know, that's when like Hugh Board and those type of people were in the band, and Cliff Alexis, all, you know, and all those. I've been lucky enough to have conversations with all of these gentlemen, and just to hear their stories and understand what it was like being a part man tour in America in the 60s. You know, talking to Gally Cummins about playing football in the US in the late 60s and in the 70s in the Jim Crow South of Atlanta. Yeah. It's stories that make me stand taller. Yeah. As not just a Trinidadian, but as a Trinidadian man, as a black Trinidadian man, as a, you know what I'm saying? It's all these layers that their words and their music and what they were able to put out. The level of artistry in spite of very little government funding, very little, you know what I'm saying, judgment from people, because back then being a pan man wasn't like now. Yeah. Back then being a pan, like having 2 sticks in your pocket was like having a gun in your pocket, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. And so just having that picture in my head
Yeah.
Something that makes me walk taller.
Yeah, yeah. And also, certainly, how do all those stories and the sounds influence your own creative process in the now?
I just tea from everybody. Yeah. They say great people copy and better people steal.
Yeah.
And I, as a composer, I feel so lucky to be from a place that not only has such a rich body of work to draw from, but also to be a composer from a place where so much of our richest work by our greatest contributors and architects of our culture have not really been explored.
Yeah.
When you talk about Fitz Von Bryan, and you talk about
Yeah.
Joey Lewis, and you talk about Rupert Clemendor, and you talk about all these names, and people,
they're like, who?
You
Who's
talk about
that?
Casanova, and you talk about Fireflight, Beaver
Yeah.
Henderson, there's all these names.
Yeah.
And you start digging into them. You talk about Stephen Ensinas and the records he did in the late 70s, early 80s. There's all this, man. Every generation, you got Lovey in the teens.
Yeah.
You got Belasco in the 20s.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You got Roy and Lion in the 30s.
Yeah.
You know, you have people like Mello and Invader in the 40s,
Yeah.
King Radio. You have Kitsch in the 50s,
Yeah.
Sparrow in the 60s. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You have the
And
Rhapsody
then you
in the
have-
70s,
yeah.
and then the funk, everything comes out. Then you have Lester and Paul taking over in the 80s.
Yeah.
You have Shell Shock taking over in the
Yeah.
90s. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
yeah, yeah.
And it just is all of this brilliant stuff.
Yeah.
And for me as a composer, I'm just like, oh, but Kiss Kitty Caravan, yeah. A little bit of Shadow funky, because Shadow was funky.
As hell.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's a little bit of Shadow here, a little Dakota bass line here.
Yeah.
It's all these things, and then I put it in front of an orchestra.
Yeah.
And then I watch them, and they're like, and they don't know. They don't know it's,
They don't know it's
Shango.
all kind of thing they
Yeah,
get.
they don't know it's like, but they don't know, they don't know it's Ogun. They're just like, ding, 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 ding. So, but yeah.
Short drop, next tune.
Well, they're playing bad, they have me feeling sad. Well, they're playing this. Why they run for police? 10 criminals attack me outside of Mirama.
10 to 1 is murder.
About 10 in the night on the 5th of October.
10 to 1 is murder.
Way down Henry Street by HGM Walker.
10 to 1 is murder.
Oh, well, the leader of the gang was a hot like a pepper.
10 to 1 is murder.
And every man in the gang had a white-handed razor.
10 to 1 is murder.
They say I pushed the girl from Grenada.
10 to 1 is murder.
Well, I back until I nearly fall in the gutter.
10 to 1 is murder.
Just imagine my position at the police in the area.
10 to 1 is murder. 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 10 to 1 is murder.
Well, I start to sweat, man, I soaking wet. Mama, so much threats. That's a night I can't forget. 10 of them against me with 50 spectators.
10 to 1 is murder.
And the way they coming up like they want to devour.
10 to 1 is murder.
But in the heat of the excitement is then I remember.
10 to 1 is murder.
In the next pants pocket.
I mean, arguably, this is a rapsode tune as well.
Yeah.
As well as the sweetness of Sparrow's voice. 10 to 1 is murder.
Yeah, there's a few Rhapsody tunes that happened before Rhapsody became Rhapsody, for sure. This one, I would say Spanish Calypso by Roy and Lion.
Yeah.
Is another one that's Rhapsody from a long time ago.
Yeah.
But this track tells it all. I mean, it gives you Trinidad history.
Yeah.
It tells you about Miramar.
Yes.
You know, which for some people is like, but I know people tell me that when they would tell me about when they were small and they had to walk down to go and pick up their father at Miramar and bring him home. Because back then there was no cell phone and thing.
No,
it's like, your father is probably at Miramar. Go pick him up.
Because the
Walk
wife
down
can't go.
And back then is a 10, 12-year-old boy walking down to town and come, Daddy, let me go home.
Wow.
And that song is, of course, about Sparrow supposedly getting in a fight because of a quote-unquote brushing or altercation with a woman from Grenada.
Yeah.
And it was him against 10 men. And the story goes that Sparrow had a gun and he fired the gun in the air.
What up,
he said,
and everybody scatter.
Notice he didn't say he fired the gun, He said, I hear poto po, and the crowd started to scatter. So he technically, he says that he didn't fire it, but that's how the story goes. But it's, for me, and Errol Lynn, 17-year-old Errol Lynn's on this recording, some of the best trumpet playing ever heard. And the fact that he's 17 makes it so humbling.
Yeah.
And that he was just having fun.
Yeah.
You know, as a teenager, going to the studio to record it. I think they recorded this they used to record at Deluxe Cinema. So they used to have to record before noon because they had to be out and clear off before they started shooting. So they didn't have many takes to do these records. They did one song a day. And they would learn the song in the studio. Wow. So that's the type of genius we're dealing with. I think that might be Slam Charles on bass. That was around the era that Slam Charles was doing records with Sparrow. That's what, for me, that's old time, guys. That's no drum set. Yeah. That's tumbas, bongos, either marak or shaker, horn section, bass, guitars. That's it. No piano, no keys, no nothing.
Wow.
Yeah, it's almost like a parent side playing calypso.
Well, I mean, yeah.
With a horn section.
With a horn section.
And the backup vocals. And Sparrow was a genius vocal arranger. So he had like the wabba up, wabba, and they started doing all the doo-wops. And gets me very giddy.
Yeah. Yeah, Sparrow is certainly an amazing voice, but such a man of the street. You know?
It's a great way to put it. Great way to put it. It's like he's telling a story in a rum shop.
Yeah, yeah.
Holding court.
Yeah. Yeah, you see him there. He actually, Franco Man, telling me the story of what happened. And I mean, you know, as I was saying to you, my father, who was living between Grenada and Trinidad at the time, you know, he relates his story as a teenager, in a bar when he's not supposed to be in a bar, and watching fellas who hearing the song, and every time the song comes on the jukebox, they start a fight. They start to, you know, ting up each other because, as well, it's a love way. Yeah. It is Sparrow in the Gael.
Yeah,
it is Sparrow, the old stick fighter. Sparrow the Bajan. Sparrow the warrior.
Yeah, it incites wildness. You know? Yeah. It incites. You know, I met your pops. You know, I met him at one of his poetry readings in London.
Yeah.
And but yeah, that time, that's the. What I tell people why I call the Bajan era.
Yeah.
Of calypso.
Yeah.
When you know, like people talk about Trinidad now. I'm like, this is not the first time we've had this. We just had better music with it before. You know what I'm saying? Like,
no. It's true.
Them fellas was walking down the street in their suit.
Yeah.
Hat. Flam out.
Yeah.
Knife in their pocket.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? David Rudder said knife in the pocket, wig on their head.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I mean, you know, several of the Calypsonians were pimps, not just here, but
in London, in New York.
In New York. You know, they were living criminal lives.
Yeah, it was survival.
It was survival.
It was survival. It was what they knew, and it was the community they were in.
Yeah.
Whole nature versus nurture. But Sparrow, the voice that he would deliver these songs with, that he still has, and he still renders. You know, I heard him live in 2021, and his voice is still, you know, it's still rich and strong.
It's in.
But yeah, 10 to 1 is Murder for me is one of those. And that's why I recorded my own version of it, because it's just one of those signpost recordings that and it's like you say, it's a live with calypso.
Yeah. Short drop. Music by none other than Len Bugsy Sharp.
I couldn't come into the house of music, into the Wajan discotheque, and not bring some by probably one of the biggest inspirations for me, Bugsy Sharp.
Yeah.
And this, what I tell people about Bugsy Sharp is Bugsy Sharp was one of the first, what I call, soca steel band arrangers.
Yeah.
And I say it like that because he had the old Kaiso and like a very brass style of arranging, but also he was heavily influenced by the funk. And you hear it in the bass line. Most people, when they ask about the difference between calypso and soca, they say, well, soca is the Indian rhythm mixed with the African rhythm. But I take it a step further because I am a musician. The difference for me, the main difference between soca and calypso is the bass line.
Yeah.
Calypso is doom, ding, doom, ding, ding, doom, ding, doom, ding, boom, ding, doom, ding, doom, 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 ding. Very two feel, boom, doom, ding, doom, ding, ding. When you get to calypso, that ding, doom, ding. So there's all this space and there's all this syncopation. And for me, that's really how I think how Bugsy gets his nickname, because his bass line, he's always moving, he's always bouncing it around. And iMusic for me, the reason I chose iMusic is for me, it's one of the most Bugsy's the master of the jam.
Yeah.
And he would get to a jam early in the arrangement. And the jam in this was it's like very funky. It's very downbeat based.
Yeah.
And every time I listen, and then so the background goes all these downbeat, then the sound, the front lines come up, but and they're playing all this upbeats. It becomes like rhythmic cacophony, but it's all drive and you're going along the road. And this with my father, my brother, my uncle are all on this track. So for me, it's also a chance for me to get to listen to my family.
Yeah. You played pan as well. You also played with Phase 2. Did you play for Panorama?
Yeah.
Or?
I did 3 panoramas before I left to go to university.
I like to ask people who are part of that steel band experience about, the feeling of going on stage and playing for your community. When the lights go up and you get the counting, or even on the track. I mean, I feel like the whole experience of Panorama is a spiritual one. From the time you gather outside there at the top of Chancery Lane, and then you come up the track, and everybody watching to see, and
Yeah, I mean, for me, because it was something that I used to watch as a child. Right, I used to go to Panorama prelims and semis with either my mom or my grandparents, whoever, and just to see the lights go up after the band's set up. See people put on their jersey quick. To start playing. And when I started playing in the band, I used to play on the first year, I played on the float on the north side side, because they probably thought I couldn't play, so they put me in the back where they were handling. And then after that, I switched to the front facing side, and then they put me down front my third year. But the energy of the drag, and when you come up that ramp, you're pushing up that ramp, and then you set up, and then it's like, where these flag women come from? It's like all of these cat suit, like how come all the night, like it's all the theater comes into it very quickly, and then it's like boom, count up. There's the introduction from Hamilton Street in Woodbrook.
Yes.
Bands tuned by
Sharon Pitt.
Bands tuned by Herman Guppy Brown and Bertrand Kelman and Lloyd Gay, and they call the names of the tuners and they name the tune, and then that's the first time you hear the captain actual name.
Yeah.
Because the captain have a nickname, like the captain is Bert.
Yeah.
But but I know that Bert name is Anthony Gomez. Like there's literally I tell people there's 3 times that he's learned somebody's real name. Wedding, a funeral, and when they announce them on
Panorama stage.
You know, say, oh, Captain by so-and-so, but Clappy name is so-and-so, right? You just don't know people's
Yeah,
real name.
yeah.
And for me, that's like Panyard culture. You know, that's Panyard culture. Preggy name is, I still don't know Preggy name. Bruce name is not Bruce. I go down and listen to real people. Tony G was the conga man. I never know Tony G real name. You know, Redman. I still don't know Redman name.
Emerald Watson.
Exactly. You know. So no, there's another Redman. There's
Another
a
Redman.
Redman that
Another
plays drums.
Redman. Okay, fine.
There's a Redman that was also called Sugars. So
wow.
But for me, that whole Panyard culture is something. And then going up on that drag, and coming up and then getting ready to play, and then the little rush, and then the count happens, and you just remember hours and hours and hours of practice. You remember who cried because they get dropped. Who stand up on the side still supporting you.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That who pushed the plan for you anyway, even though they get dropped. Like, all that to me, that ecosystem for me is what I got the most out of playing pan.
Yeah. Very emotional, very emotional.
Yep. And the rum done.
The rum done. Rum done, friend done.
Rum done, friend done. I switch into water. I gotta hydrate first and then.
Next tune, shot drum.
I've been schooled since a tiny tot to love my roots in words, deeds, and thoughts. And I'm sure you will understand why I love calypso and steel band. Dig the pan man, pan woman, dig the mass man, the musician, calypsonian, the artist man, the dancer man, dig the soca man. In this land where the steel pan born, with love and pain, under hate and scorn, man play with pride in his heart. Yet we ignore this wonderful art. Dig the pan man, pan woman, dig the mass man, the musician, calypsonian, the artist man, the dancer man, dig the soca man. Calypso sweeping through this world. Here at home, we don't praise we own. We prefer the foreign cultures.
Goes back to what we were talking about.
And we are teased.
Love Your Own, a side B track. A side B track. Can you believe? A side B track. Ella Andel. I mean, you know, the track A was Black Woman with Lancelot Lane singing background vocals. And then this is the side B track. I mean, Love Your Own. And I mean, she's singing what we've been talking about for most of this conversation about how much we perhaps don't even see our own to be able to love it, you know? Yeah. And also to say, Maria Nunes also chose this track. Maria is one of your collaborators.
Yep.
And it's very interesting that the two of you chose this track.
Yeah, she introduced me to this track.
Really?
Actually. We were driving through Costa Rica and she had this playlist on her phone. And I was like, yo, what is that? and I was like, I said a horn player had to do that arrangement.
Yeah.
You could always tell based on the arrangement for me, I could always tell it was a keyboard player, a horn player, a bass player. You could always tell it was a bass player like Less Than Paul, or like an Art Decoto arrangement, or Earl Rodney arrangement. They're coming from the bottom. And then this one you could tell is coming from the top. And the lines that he designed, and as the track develops, as you know, it just goes up and up and up and up. And Ella's voice You know, I couldn't come on here and not acknowledge the queen. You know, she really is a queen, and she's one of our own that we have to always lift up because her sound and her presence and her music is a truth that we need to always be listening to. Kind of like singing Sandra. Yeah. When she had voices at the ghetto. It is like, you know, there's these signpost tunes that always come from women to tell you what to be listening for and looking at and paying attention to. Yeah. And this is a time now when I remember when Watson and Maria chose it. And since I'm paying tribute to arrangers and to Fortuna Ruiz, great trumpet player, great arranger, I had to bring this one in because I wanted something a little bit different, a little more engaging, because it's like very interactive arrangement. There's not that much space in it. Yeah. But it works perfectly. And the melody, Ella killed the melody. It's a hard melody. That's not easy to do. Yeah. But she does it. She does it, and she does it really, really well. To close off on that idea of loving your own, you know, you live away from home. You're back quite a bit, but you know, finding community outside of Trinidad, finding spaces for love, support, a sense of belonging. What is that like when you're on tour a lot, teaching? You know, you live a life of transience in a lot of ways. What keeps you grounded? I mean, family more than anything else. You know, I'm lucky. My father's one of 12. My mother's one of 7. So I have relatives just about everywhere I play. Just about. Or a friend of a relative everywhere I play. Yeah. So that, in a sense, connects me to communities all over the world that I've already been connected to through my family. And for me, everything starts with the family and at home. And, you know, every idea I have, whether it's for a record or a carnival band, I bounce it off of the committee. I call it the jury. And it's my mom, my aunt, my uncle, and my father. And I bounce it off of them. My village, as I call it. Yeah. And everything, I mean, I have outrageous ideas, and sometimes they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, no, we're doing it. We're doing it. Don't worry. But yeah, and for me, you know, as Trini as I am, I'm also a citizen of the world. And it's something that was hammered into the head of my mother by my grandmother. Yeah. And by my grandmother, by my great-grandmother, and by my mother to me. And borders are man-made things. And flags are man-made things. And the concept of a country is one of the creations of man that divided us in a way that we're still trying to navigate and we're still trying to stop. So as much as I am Trinbagonian, I am a man of the world, and planet is my core, and my community is global. And on top of that, Trinis are everywhere. We like salt. We like salt. I ain't in the middle of Morocco and I hear salt fish. Nothing in the bush sweeter than salt coming out of a bath. What is this? And then I go inside and the fellas watching TV and I hear, oh, good boy. that's definitely a Trinidadian. So yeah, I mean, and being a musician has given me the privilege to go into certain spaces without fear, based on what might happen. I've been to the roughest neighborhoods on the planet to teach or to play or to connect with musicians there, and there's still that common denominator and respect for people who communicate with the ancestors, which I think is what musicians do. We listen to the ancestors and we tell their stories, whether it's with an old song or a new song. And the globe gets smaller every day. This planet, I met somebody from Saudi Arabia last night who lives in Saudi Arabia, Trinidadian. And I'm like, but you just look familiar to me, your nature every day. Come to find out, I knew her father, I knew her little sister, you know. Yeah. Just like these connections, even though they're all the way there, and we all the way in Tong. But it's an interesting thing how the world, it gets smaller every day, and I'm grateful for it. And music is the connector. You know, when Tamar Salas says community is the calling, love is the calling card, and balance is the destination. I think that's the perfect way to say it.
Yeah.
You know?
Awesome.
That's what we do.
You, just to close, you had a lot of trouble choosing your 7 tracks. it was difficult.
It's like choosing between 80-something children.
Do you have any honorable mentions that you wanted to?
Lionel Belasco, hands down.
Yeah.
You know, one of our unsung heroes.
Yeah.
Who really influenced not just Trinidad, but the whole Caribbean and South America as well.
Yeah.
So I have to big him up. I had a track lined up for his called Go Away Girl, which is a piano roll.
Yeah.
Ragtime had a lot of influence in Trinidad at that time. I have to big up Shadow.
Yeah.
The funkiest, you know, the realest, the most cutting of a lyric. You know, 10 little children, 4 dumpling, mama got to slice them tin. A piece for a boy and a piece for a girl. Piece for the neighbor, daughter, the cat in the corner looking to beg. Little Jack Warner kicking me the leg, go in the room, he look for a rat. The rat in the room, he know about cat. And the cat see a chicky chong. Yeah. He rushed for the chicky chong, but the poor little chicky chong flew away like a chicky chong. Then cockroach gone in the condensed milk. Mama get vexed with the condensed milk. Who leave the condensed milk open? Come here, you picky head, good for nothing. Mama get vexed and she blood get hot, she bust some lash. And then you know what? Poverty is hell. That, for me, he finished all the stanzas with Chicky Chong, and before that he finished all the stanzas with, all the stanzas with Chicky Chong, and then he finished all the stanzas with condensed milk. No calypso in his real time could finish every line for 2 sets of lines with the same word, except for Shadow.
Except for Shadow.
And the last one I had to big up is Stalin, the black man, because he was able to hype up crowds with vibes, and he was also able to be like, look, this is the situation. And Cannonball Adley had the saying that I give people 50% of what they want to hear and 50% of what they need to hear. And I think the black man used to do that too.
He used to do that. All season man.
All man of all seasons, and very, like a very debonair spirit. Yeah. And the way he would deliver it, always a big smile, even about the most cutting of topics. And so those are my 3 that on the bench.
Yeah. But great players to have on the bench, though.
I know.
Thank you so much, Etienne, for sharing these tracks inside the House of Music with us. Inside the Wajang discotheque. We finally get you. Inside. I will see you on the road. Rhythm Brass Mass.
Rhythm Brass Mass. We're coming again.
Nicely.